So today I wanted to share with you some reflections on a subject that touches all of us, that touches the entire cosmos, and that we heard a lot about, but not always study in depth. And this is not at all an in-depth study of karma. These are just some reflections that hopefully will inspire you to look more in depth into the subject. And the idea of today is not to see it so much as an intellectual, as an information that is out there, but as we move along the slides and the subject, to see if we can begin to envision what this means for us. How are we part of this? And can these suggestions that come from a theosophical perspective be somewhat pointing in the direction of how reality is? And what is our place within that reality? So when I say a theosophical view of karma, I'm saying my limited understanding of some theosophical teachings that explain what karma is and how it is related to us. And today we want to also focus on how is this impactful for us and our destiny as souls. So karma is defined as a law. And what I thought first was that what we know of laws, we usually know through human laws or through laws of nature, but that have been defined by science. Now, the limitation that brings is that science almost exclusively focuses on what can be observed in the physical realm and the physical world. But we know very well as human beings that our physical aspect is just one aspect of what we are. And that seeing a law only from a physical perspective would be missing all the other areas of or realms of existence. And then we will go into this a little more. So what science knows, natural laws that are approved by science, that science says these are laws, are based on repeated experimental evidence that describe a set of observations in the physical natural world. So they are not explanations of what these laws are, where they come from, why they are here, where are we going. They are descriptions of how the universe behaves. So we observe this behavior and it repeats. They must be universally accepted as true, and which means the law has to manifest universally, equally, everywhere it's measured, and applicable under consistent circumstances. So that's how we consider some of the laws of nature observed from the scientific perspective. And by the way, I am not a scientist, so bear that in mind. So just a couple of laws for us to consider. First, in this case, Newton's laws. Some of the simple ones, the ones that touch our existence and that we experience every day. One of them, the law of universal gravitation. Every object in the universe attracts every other object with a force proportional to their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between their centers. So there is a universal gravitation that is affecting the physical world, and we don't not only see it on Earth, but we see it in the solar system as well. And another law, just to mention these two, and this one in particular because it's going to have to do with the law of karma. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. When an object exerts a force on another, the action, the second object simultaneously exerts an equal and opposite force back on the first. That is the reaction. To every cause, there is an effect. But to every action, there is a reaction. And so here we have, for example, something so simple as this glass standing on the table. We're completely used to this fact. It's so common for us. But there is so much happening here based on the weight of this glass and the gravitational pull. There is a force that's being exercised on the table. And the very interesting thing is that simultaneously, even though we cannot see it, there is an equal force pointing upwards that is actually keeping this object in place. These laws are applied in so many areas of our lives without even noticing. We can walk because of this law. And our bodies can function in multiple ways because of this law, of these laws and others. Now the question is, these are observations of things that happen in the physical world, in the physical realm. But is that all that the universe is? What we can perceive with our senses? Some traditions say that that's not the case. And don't worry about this graphic. You don't have to memorize it. Just wanted to point out that in the Theosophical teachings, we find the idea that consciousness can exist at many levels, and not only at the physical, that the physical is this densest part of the universe in which we interact because we have a physical body and because we have senses, physical senses. And there we move and have our being. Now, science only studies this area of life in the sense that it can only measure this much of the human and the universal experience. Now, other traditions, like the Theosophical and others, point out that there are subtler levels of being. And you'll see that for each of these planes, we have a vehicle, we have a body. So we have a body for the physical plane. We have a body for this etheric, more subtler part of the physical plane, and sometimes called the etheric double. It is the one that receives the prana from the sun. It is the one that can be used for energy healing. Through that etheric body, we receive energy healing, for example. Of course, this is outside the realm of science. This is metaphysics. Now, we are all aware of our emotional nature. We cannot deny that there are emotions. And Theosophy says we have a body, we have an emotional body that can interact with emotions in the same way that the physical interacts with the physical realm. So that body, that emotional body, receives emotions, sends forth emotions, and we're constantly building it. In the same way, a mental body that is associated mostly with the random thoughts, the thoughts that are identified with emotions and body. We have a higher aspect of the mind. This would be when consciousness begins to receive the influence of the soul. So this is spiritual intuition, this is devotion, compassion, and so forth. And we can say this is the oneness of all life. This is a chart, and of course, life is not a chart. The universal experience, like here right now, everything is happening simultaneously. I have a body, a physical body, I have the emotions that are interpenetrating the body, the physical, the mind as well. Thoughts are interpenetrating the emotions and the body, and the soul and spirit as well. So, and these are higher, even higher planes of consciousness, all the way up into, there's no up or down or in or out, but into spirit and pure spirit. So then Theosophy and other traditions as well address the laws that are unseen to the eyes. In the same way that we can perceive physically. So the fact that we can perceive the gravitational pull physically doesn't mean that that gravitational pull doesn't exist at other subtler levels. in the same way that we see cause and effect on this glass on the table, are there other areas in which cause and effect is also functioning? So that is the question that we want to bring with this exploration. Theosophy says, yes, there are a number of laws functioning in the universe, and they are within the system. We are part of them. It says all laws of nature are expressions of the divine nature, and we live and move within them. They say these natural laws are unchanging. They remain the same. They cannot be altered. And they lie in the nature of things and are impartial in the sense that they don't choose. They're completely impartial. They're partial, like in the same way the gravitational pull is impartial. So something that Annie Besant, who was a Theosophist, a remarkable woman at so many levels, she was also one of the international presidents of the Theosophical Society. She wrote extensively about karma, a study on karma, an entire book, and many articles about it. She explored it fully, and she studied very deeply the Eastern traditions. She said, laws affecting physical phenomena have been rescued from this arbitrariness by science. But the mental and moral worlds are still in the chaos of lawlessness. We have laws for what happens at the physical level, but we don't have laws for what happens emotionally, mentally, psychologically, spiritually. Theosophy says, yes, there are laws. Karma, the law of karma, removes human thought and desire from the region of arbitrary happenings to the realm of law, and thus places a person's future under their own control in proportion to the amount of their knowledge. In proportion to the amount that we understand these laws, we can work with them. Because we understand how gravity works, we have discovered so many things. We are capable of, as human beings, of doing so much. So what are we capable of doing when it comes to the hidden laws? Only hidden because they're not physical, hidden to the eyes. But with a little bit of common sense, we will see that we can actually even perceive from one week to another that these laws actually exist, these subtler hidden laws. So what is karma? As I mentioned already, karma is considered a law. It's literally translated as action. The one universal law which guides unerringly, and so to say blindly, all other laws. So it's the mother of all the hidden and visible laws. It's been called universal causation, the law of cause and effect. To every cause, there is an effect. To every movement, there is an effect. To every action, there is an effect. And that's why karma is called action. It is not a special law, but a universal condition, which is also very important, of which all other laws are partial expressions. The restoration of a primordial equilibrium disturbed by the action of personal free will. So karma, it is seen as the law of harmony and equilibrium, a primordial equilibrium that through action has been disturbed, shifted, and because of that action, there will be an effect. So this tells us that perhaps instead of seeing things in terms of time, there is a cause and eventually there is an effect, we could begin to consider the possibility that karma is like a mesh. It is like a net. And when we pull from one end, inevitably, well, the thread is going to move in that direction. The same in this direction. and the other direction. So it's not so much cause and effect in the sense like one thing, the other, but something that is happening simultaneously and that we experience in terms of time because we are confined within a sense of time. The teachings say none who are embodied can escape it. But the one point that I want to emphasize today is this one. Karma has been called the law of opportunity. And I really like to think it in those terms, because usually we think of karma as that which we deserve, but usually in a negative sense, as a punishment that comes to us. But karma has nothing to do with that. It is a natural response to a movement that has been created. It's like throwing a pebble into a lake. The ripples of it are the consequence of that movement. Now, in what way will karma be an opportunity? Well, in the same way that we understand gravity and work with it, we can understand karma and work with it. A little bit more about how it was defined. H.P. Blavatsky, the spiritual founder of the society, defines karma in this way in the Key to Theosophy. She says, we consider it as the ultimate law of the universe, the source, origin, and fount of all other laws which exist throughout nature. Karma is the unerring law which adjusts effect to cause. So it adjusts effect to cause on the physical, mental, and spiritual planes of being. All these different planes that are constantly interacting with one another. How can we say that the body is not interacting with emotions and mind? Body is constantly interacting. How can we say the thoughts are not interacting with the emotions? How can we say that the soul is not interacting with thoughts and emotions? So we can begin to think over here of the causes that we're constantly creating at a physical level, emotional, mental, and spiritual. As no cause remains without its due effect, from greatest to least, from a cosmic disturbance down to the movement of your hand. And as like produces like, karma is that unseen and unknown law which adjusts wisely, intelligently, and equitably each effect to its cause, tracing the latter back to its producer. So here we can begin to see that the complexity of this law that is embracing the entire cosmos, actually, and ourselves as part of it at all these levels is a lot more complex that just my life experience, having a difficulty and saying, oh, that's karma, or don't do that thing because, you will receive karma for that. You begin to understand that as Annie Besant says, while the basic principle of karma, actions bringing corresponding results, is simple to understand, truly mastering its workings requires deep, detailed study. And one of the reasons for this is that each of these causes that are constantly happening, this movement of the hand, this thought, the thousands of thoughts that we have every day, and the emotions, and our relationship with the divine, all those are causes. And not only that they are causes, they create effects. And not only that they create effects, those effects become new causes. And that is a very key, important part of this process. Those effects become new causes. Something so interesting that she says that I think nobody thought of this, but she says, where prophets have laid down moral laws, these have been declarations of inevitable sequences in the moral world, known to the prophet unknown to their ignorant hearers, or those who didn't know as much as them, in the sense of when we have the prophets or the seers or the saints or the enlightened beings who can see this law at work, then they have tried to warn us and say, because we can see it, but we cannot tell you that we see this, because first you're not going to believe us, then you're not going to understand it. But what we're going to tell you is, love yourself and love your neighbor. Why? Because that cause can never go wrong. And we're going to see why. So that's just one example. But the idea is that we have been told how to work with the law of karma. It's just that it hasn't been expressed in that way. So observing our life objectively, we can begin to see how karma works, starting with the physical body. Of course, I am going to talk in general terms because karma in this tradition is seen as something that is eternal. And it doesn't only apply to this lifetime, but it applies to all lifetimes in the understanding that there is reincarnation. So just taking one life and taking 10-year span of our own lives, we can see that physically, if we eat nutritional food, good food, if we sleep well, if we exercise a little, we build, for the most part, in general terms, a healthy body. Right? When we cultivate kindness and we try to live with kindness, for the most part, we tend to receive kindness and be in an atmosphere of kindness. When we cultivate hatred and treat people with hatred, we tend to receive hatred or begin to build circles of hatred. And I'm going to the extremes so we can see it, but every other emotion is valuable as well. Mentally, what we choose to think or not choose to think, because most of our thoughts we don't even choose. 99.9% of our thoughts arise. That is the cause. If we continue to think in that direction, they become stronger and stronger. Cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. We begin to build our destiny. We build our destiny physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And we don't really need to speculate what happened in a previous lifetime. I have enough material with my own life to know how all the causes of my life have brought me where I am today, for good or bad. Good or bad, so to speak. For challenging, to bring challenges, or to bring experiences that are of ease or of love. Both of them valid. So something really beautiful about the explanations in a study in Karma by Annie Besant is this conception of a law that is eternal, that is universal. She says this universal law of causation binds together into one all that happens within a manifestation of the universe. For it is universal interrelation. Universal interrelation. Interrelation between all that exists. That is karma. So when we talk about that we're all interconnected, that we are all one, that there is only one life, this is what we're talking about. This mesh, that it is one. And it's being pulled in different directions. It's creating causes and effects that affect the entire human race and also the planet and so forth. And the entire universe as well. There are so many beautiful metaphors and actually real sayings about how a small action in one corner of the earth can have an impact, a major impact in another corner. Another one is karma is eternal as a universal self, is eternal as that one being. The interrelation of everything always is. It never begins, it never ceases to be. In the all, everything is always. And this is something that I wanted to bring because we are so used to the sense of time, right? What happened in the past, what happens now, what is going to happen in the future. And this really breaks that pattern. It says, in the all, everything is always. All that has been, all that now is manifest, all that will be, all that can be, all possibilities as well as all actualities are ever in being in the all. So from a certain perspective, not from the physical world perspective, but from a higher perspective, everything is happening now, even though the mind has a very hard time grasping that. Each effect becomes in turn a cause, and so endlessly the difference between cause and effect not being one of nature, but of relation. So karma is this constant relation with all that is eternally and one. So one more very important part of this is that not only that for us to begin to understand how karma works, first we would have to become more aware, have some develop some self-observation, and begin to be more aware of the causes that we are planting, the seeds that we're planting at all these levels, physical, emotional, mental. And not only that, there is another point, that a very important point, that it says that not only that we have to keep taking account of what we do at those levels, but also what the intention is. That motivation, what motivates us to act, is key. So for example, if I learned what the law of karma does, but then I try to use it for my own personal benefit, well, it's not bad, but it will have a karmic effect. And it will keep me within the wheel of samsara. If I use the law of karma to benefit the eternal oneness, the one life, then I'm closer to eventually being free from the ties of the law of karma. So in Theosophy and many other traditions, the point is always that as long as we see and perceive ourselves as separate from the rest, we will always be slaved within the circle of samsara. Even when we use, and especially when we use spiritual laws for personal benefit. So I will leave that right there, but an invitation to explore more in that direction. So HPB, for example, says, let not the fruit of good karma be your motive. Even that. Your motive being selfish can only generate a double effect, good and bad, and will either nullify your good action or turn it to another person's profit. Something interesting to consider. We're almost at the end of the presentation, and I would like us to do a short exercise at the end, like a meditation type of exercise together, So we can leave this reflection with some tool that we can apply. I wanted to show the fact that we can also perceive all this from the standpoint of vibration. Annie Besant says, every change in consciousness is answered by a vibration in matter. And a similar change, however often repeated, brings about a similar vibration. So this is how we create our destiny, so to speak, shape our destiny. By repetition. If you repeat a thought, it repeats the corresponding vibration. And as when matter has vibrated in a particular way once, it is easier for it to vibrate in that same way again than to vibrate in a new way. So this means if I am used to have pessimistic thoughts, and then one day I say I'm going to have optimistic thoughts, and I only have that one moment effort, the tendency of the mind is going to go back to the past habit, physically, emotionally, mentally. But in the effort of repeating the new vibration, again, at any of those levels, and sustain it, some people say 21 days, but sustain it, then there could be a shift in vibration. Now, the motives of why we do that, it's up to us. The more often you repeat a thought, the more ready the vibrational response will be. So, to finalize, something so interesting and some simple as taste. We're born with a certain palate. And you might remember when you were young, when you were little, that there were so many things you didn't like. Let's say olives, though I've seen a lot of children eating olives and really liking them. But let's say olives. How do we move from not liking olives to actually eating olives with a lot of pleasure? Well, Annie Besant says, by the action of will directed by the mind. So someone said, olives are good, olives are part of our culture, we eat them. Then the will comes and says, I will eat olives. And then the action of eating the olive comes. The reason why I'm showing this is because she says, everything is changeable. Let's say I was born with terrified of being on stage, which I was, by the way. And through time, she says, we can imagine ourselves in thought that we can stand on a stage and we can talk to people, and it's fine. So that would be the mind aspect. I can imagine myself doing something that I'm afraid of doing. But then, she says, comes the most important part. The will to do it and the action, the actual action. That is what seals, so to speak, that baby step that we're making. If I continue to imagine myself being comfortable on a stage and only in my mind, it will have a certain effect, but it will take years until I can actually stand on a stage. But facing my fear, the will of being on a stage, the will of acting and doing what we're afraid of doing once, then really changes us. So much happens when we face a fear and we follow through, as we say. And as we repeat that, we conquer a shortcoming, a fear, a habit that is not conducive to well-being or happiness, and so forth. An additional element that I like to add is that to me personally, and this is not something that I found in the books that I have mentioned, but to me personally, silence has been a very, very good friend. In the space that we create through silence, and when I say silence, it's silence of the body, silence of the words, silence of the mind, there is also a shift in vibration. When we calm all the things that we're constantly identifying with, who we truly are, as the teachings say, and as we all have experienced to some extent, is present, is allowed to be there. And when that is allowed to be there, some grace, as sometimes we call it, some light from the divine shines through, and we are also transformed. So just to finish with a little bit of an experiment that we can do together, I'm going to invite you to, just for a moment, think of something very small. Let's not go big. Something very small that you would like to change, that you think, that you have felt for a while, that it is time. And you're going to imagine yourself with that opposite quality, whether it is the courage to face a certain fear or a change in a habitual pattern, whether physically, emotional, and mental. And you're going to see yourself overcoming that or changing that pattern. Imagine yourself in all kinds of scenarios. With that new quality you want to unfold. And you see yourself being the best and greatest example of that quality. And then you're going to tell yourself that you're going to try it today, once. If it's not possible today, tomorrow. And then just to take note, notice if that quality or virtue or change could be in any way of benefit to others. And then with that intention, we slowly open our eyes. So to close, just wanted to say that this is just a very small way of presenting an idea that can have tremendous impact in our lives, in the lives of others, and in our future. Because whether we know it or not, right now, we are building our future with what we think, with what we feel, and with what we do.